Hey, it's Sela Social Studies.
And welcome back to CLS Social Studies. All right, sticking with the westward theme, today we're going to be covering Texas independence. How does Texas gain its independence? All right, but kind of in order to start with the Texas Revolution, the war for Texas independence, we have to talk about Mexico. So, as you know, after the Revolutionary War, happens, you have the United States towards the east of the Mississippi River, and Spain kind of took everything west of the Mississippi River. Okay, so you have parts of Mexico, the western part of the United States, Florida, it all belonged to Spain. So, how does Mexico gain its independence in order for Texas to go into a war with Mexico to gain it? So, let's start there. Father Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla, who was a Mexican priest, led an unsuccessful revolt against Spain in 1810, and this really started the ball rolling into Mexico gaining its independence. And in 1821, after a change of leadership in Spain and in Mexico, the new Mexican government and the Spanish government signed a treaty to give Mexico its independence from Spain. So that's how Mexico gains its independence. It's just through a treaty, through new leaders between Spain and Mexico. So now that Mexico has gained their independence, they have to figure out what they're going to do with their land. And part of their land happened to be Texas. So this new Mexican government hires empresarios or agents to bring settlers into the Texas area. You want people to live there. Land not being used in their eyes is wasted land. And Stephen F. Austin happens to be one of these agents or empresarios who were brought in to bring settlers there. And he starts a colony on the lower Colorado River in 1822. Now, the success of this colony attracted many more American settlers who would receive free land from the Mexican government in exchange for them to obeying Mexican laws and do things like practice Catholicism. Okay, so they had to say that they were Catholic, they had to obey the Mexican laws, and if you did that, you got free land. So Mexico started to be concerned about the number of Americans who were coming in to their Texas territory and really started to ban further settlement. Now, what have we learned about American history when you try to ban American westward expansion? It's not going to end well. There's probably going to be some sort of war involved. And right, here's another example of that. General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna became the ruler of Mexico at this time, and he actually becomes the ruler of or the commander of their army as well. So with Texas now being settled by many Americans, of course, they wanted to be free of Mexican rule. They wanted to be part of the United States because part of the United States, you got a lot more than when you were part of Mexico. So the Texas War for Independence began on October 1835 in the Battle of Gonzales, Texas. This is a battle that's fought between the Texas the Texas military, not the United States military, but the Texas Army, the Texas Rangers, I guess we'll call them, right? The Texas Rangers. They declare their independence on March 2nd, 1836, and the Republic of Texas is formed. It's established. Now we have a Republic of Texas. But just like the American War for Independence, our Revolutionary War, and our Declaration of Independence, did the Declaration of Independence for Texas mean that they were independent? No, they had to finish fighting the Texas War of Revolution, just like the colonies had to fight the Revolutionary War to become independent from Britain. So Sam Houston was named head of the Texas Army, and Stephen F. Austin actually went to the United States to ask for money and troops to be able to help fight this war. Now, there's two major battles that we're going to cover in here, because you have to remember, this is not the United States fighting Mexico. This is literally the Republic of Texas, who just declared their independence, fighting against the whole country of Mexico. The first battle we're going to cover here is going to be the Battle of the Alamo. What the Alamo is, the Alamo, I'm sinking in my chair. The Alamo is a Spanish mission, kind of like a church. It has thick walls. It has a whole bunch of rooms in there. It's kind of got a like a plaza in the middle. So it's this Spanish mission, and the Battle of the Alamo has really become a symbol of patriotic sacrifice, is what we'll call it. Many important Americans fought at the Battle of the Alamo. You had the Tennessee Congressman Davy Crockett. You had James Bowie, who was an entrepreneur, and you also had Colonel William Travis. But you have these Texas Rangers. They're fighting in the Alamo, and there's about 200. The numbers actually range from about 190 to 200 members of the Battle of the Alamo, or these Texas Rangers who are fighting in this Battle of the Alamo. And what happens here is there's a big kind of miscommunication, as well as kind of a big accident that happens. And Colonel Travis hears that Santa Anna is on his way to attack the Alamo, and he says, "Well, I don't think he's going to get there until, I think he said, late March." And instead, Santa Anna actually forces his troops to march faster, and they actually get there at the end of February, which you see right there, February 23rd to March 6th, the Battle of the Alamo was fought. And Santa Anna goes in there, and he wants to siege the Alamo. He basically wants to starve them out. He has a much bigger army. He's got about 2,000 to 5,000 of his Mexican army against 190 to 250 Texas Rangers in this Alamo. So you have these small defenders in there against a surrounding Mexican army. And finally, on one day, March 6th, Santa Anna says he leads the charge. All right, guys, attack. They started bombing the Alamo with their cannons. They started blowing big holes in the side of the Alamo, and Santa Anna's army, Mexican army, ran in there, and they literally slaughtered all of these Texas Rangers. A couple of things you have to remember here about the Battle of the Alamo is this. There were some slaves, some women, and the children who Santa Anna allowed to escape. He took them out as prisoners and allowed them to escape. Out of that, we'll say 200 men, I think 193 of them actually were killed in the battle. The battle itself only lasted a couple of hours, really. It was like 5 o'clock in the morning, and by 8 o'clock, all of the Alamo defenders were dead except for those 7, like I said. And basically here, Santa Anna captures those 7, brings them out, and literally calls for them to be executed. So out of the actual defenders, the people who had guns who were fighting against the Mexican army, all of them wind up dying in the Battle of the Alamo. So the other battle I want to talk about is the Battle of San Jacinto. And what's the Battle of San Jacinto? Santa Anna is chasing the retreating Texans under Sam Houston east on the San Jacinto River. And actually the San Jacinto River goes into kind of a horseshoe shape. And Sam Houston is like, all right, we're at a pretty good spot here at this bend in the San Jacinto River near Galveston Bay. And basically he said this, there's like this tree line at the top of the horseshoe, and he got his Texas Rangers to all hide out in that tree line there. And Santa Anna's following in suit, and Santa Anna's following the river, and he actually in that Galveston Bay area, he has his men stop. He says, all right, guys, it's it's time to have siesta. Let's go ahead and break everything down, pile up our weapons, put our horses over there. You guys, let's start relaxing, because that's big in the Spanish culture, is their siesta time. So at this point in time, during the siesta, Houston gives this surprise attack, and all of a sudden these Rangers start running out of the forests and into their into that open area there, and they just really just throw the gauntlet down onto Santa Anna and his men. That battle took, I want to say, 18 minutes. The Battle of San Jacinto. Houston just annihilated Santa Anna, and they wound up taking 630 Mexican casualties. 730 of Mexican army were taken prisoner. which only 9 out of the over 900 Texas Rangers were casualties. They were able to get pistols, muskets, sabers, mules, tents, a large supply of gold and silver, and Santa Anna, right? Santa Anna was found hiding in some tall grass wearing a common soldier uniform, and he wasn't even found out until one of the men called him El Presidente. So they knew they had Santa Anna. So, what's really the important thing about the Battle of San Jacinto, besides it being a surprise attack that Houston led and annihilated Santa Anna's army? Well, this is where Santa Anna actually surrenders. And once Santa Anna surrenders, that's it. He signs a treaty that gives Texas its independence. So Sam Houston is a national hero of Texas, and he becomes the president of this independent nation of Texas, or this independent Republic of Texas. And Stephen F. Austin, that impresario, becomes the first Secretary of State there. And to increase the population, Texas offers many land grants to new settlers from nearby states. Now, it's in the South, so these people who are coming over there are bringing their slaves with them. They're enslaved African Americans. So now that leaves a decision for Andrew Jackson. Most Texans hoped immediately that the United States would annex or take over control of Texas and make it a state immediately. However, that's not what happened. Texas does not become a state immediately. It remains in limbo, and it remains an independent nation for almost 10 years. Jackson recognizes the issue that if Texas were to become as a slave state, it would upset the balance between free and slave states if they let Texas enter as a slave state, and Jackson didn't want to deal with that. He was ending his presidency at that time. He was just kind of going to pass the buck along. So Texas was not annexed immediately. It became a state, or it stayed an independent nation until really the end of the Mexican-American War.